Hi, I'm Michael Makovsky, the President and CEO of JINSA. I'm here with my colleague, as usual, John Hanna, the Randi and Charles Wax, Senior Fellow here at JINSA. We're doing this on Sunday, August 17th. Thanks for joining us. Let's get to it, John. I think obviously the news in recent days has also been, of course, the Putin Trump meeting in Alaska. Obviously, in the Middle East, it remains very focused on Gaza. But we're only less than 2 months out from the end of the 12-day war. The U.S.-Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear facilities and missile and ballistic missiles, and we can't lose sight of the Iranian issue. It's not gone away. The nuclear threat, it's obviously been severely diminished, but it's important for the United States and Israel and other countries to remain vigilant that the Iranians don't rebuild their capabilities. So let's talk about that, because I think something that's not in the news much is the issue of the possibility of snapback of sanctions in the UN against Iran. So, John, why don't you explain what that is? I mean, what's involved here? What are the discussions? What are the implications, and why is this the right time to be talking about it?
Yeah. Hey, Mike. So snapback, of course, was an important provision put into the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. That was later actually also incorporated in the UN Security Council resolution that enshrined the 2015 JCPOA. It's probably the most positive and innovative feature of that entire deal, which of course was deeply problematic and flawed in so many ways. But what snapback allowed is for any one of the countries that were kind of signatories to the JCPOA, if at any time they determined that Iran was severely out of compliance with its obligations under the JCPOA, that any one participant in that deal could go to the UN, could give the UN Security Council 30 days notice, and after 30 days, the United Nations would immediately snap back all of the sanctions regime, the international sanctions regime that got suspended by the 2015 JCPOA, and that would have been sunsetted over the course of that 15-year deal. So, for example, in 2020, there had been a UN sanction against engaging in conventional arms trade with Iran. That sunsetted in 2020, went away, and Iran has, at least in theory, been able to purchase arms from abroad. And in 2023, the international sanction on trade with Iran and any missiles, or Iran's ability to proliferate missiles around the region, including to Russia, as we saw that they did with those drones a couple of years ago, that provision sunsetted as well. And in 2025, October 18th, just a couple of months away, if nobody takes action, the entire UN Security Council resolution regarding the JCPOA essentially goes away, and including the snapback provision, the ability to snap back these sanctions. So we've got a very limited window here in which now either the Brits, the French, or the Germans can go to the Security Council, invoke snapback, and all of those old sanctions, even the ones that were sunsetted on missiles, on conventional arms, on any proliferation trade with Iran, anything nuclear related, the ability to finance any of that kind of trade with the Iranian central bank. All of that will snap back into place if one of these European participants in the JCPOA acts. So the problem is we've got Russia in control of the Security Council, the presidency starting October 1st. The expiration is October 18th. We don't want to give the Russians a chance in the Security Council to somehow mess around with the procedures, delay, and essentially allow the snapback to go away. So it's very important that we get this done essentially in September when South Korea is in charge of the Security Council presidency. So the Europeans have together, the three of them have threatened and informed the Iranians that they are going to invoke snapback unless they say Iran agrees now to return to negotiations, to have a new nuclear deal, and does take some kind of measures, we presume, to allow the IAEA back into Iran to resume inspections, which the Iranians suspended and kicked out the IAEA after the 12-day war. So that's all got to happen by the very end of August, Mike. So we get that 30-day window to automatically trigger snapback. And the question is, are the Europeans and the Americans in line in an agreement that now is the time to do it? The Europeans have kind of opened up this possibility that if Iran does come back, and the Russians and Chinese agreed, we would actually not allow snapback to disappear, but we would have a new resolution that says snapback, the deadline for snapback is postponed for 6 months. So we'd have add another 6 months to the clock in which snapback would be available to see whether Iran was serious about, ending its nuclear program. But I think that kind of delay would be a very bad thing, and we can talk about why it should and needs to be done right now.
Well, let me ask you, before you do that, why is it on the Europeans and not on the United States? Could you explain that, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was as you know, the President Trump in his first term withdrew from the JCPOA in 2018, and there subsequently, when the conventional weapons sunset disappeared, the United States tried in 2020 to go to the Security Council and say, we want to invoke snapback. And there was basically a unanimous agreement there that the United States, because it had withdrawn from the deal, was no longer a party to the JCPOA and therefore did not have the power of being able to trigger snapback. So now it's left to our three allies that remain inside of the JCPOA, France, Britain, or Germany, to do so.
Is the Trump administration pressing the Europeans to do this?
It's very unclear. I think there have been some discussions about this, but you do not get a sense that there is an active effort to coordinate strategy and to push the Europeans with regard to the urgency to do this now and not give the Iranians an escape hatch, even of a 6-month delay. And it makes huge sense to me because, listen, before the 12-day war, there was always a concern by the Europeans and others that if you triggered the snapback, which could have been done because Iran's been in breach of its obligations for years now, could have been done any time. But there was always a fear Iran was so close to 90% enrichment that invoking snapback would be the trigger for them to rush to 90%, and then we'd be in a major nuclear crisis with Iran. After the 12-day war, of course, their program has been set back, depending on who you talk to, perhaps for a few years at least. And therefore, that threat of Iran dashing to a nuclear weapon is gone. What remains is the genuine fear that Iran is going to start reconstituting either its conventional air defense capabilities, its missile capabilities, or in the worst case, its nuclear capabilities. Snapback and those UN sanctions would now prohibit the Russians, the Chinese, North Koreans, any other member of the United Nations from taking actions to help Iran, either conventionally or in the missile or nuclear area, and would give us that added deterrent from any of these adversaries of the United States of moving quickly to try and help Iran reconstitute any elements of its power that were so badly set back during the 12-day war. So we've got a real urgency to do this now and to put in place those renewed sanctions that send a message to the entire world that it'll be illegal and you'll be in violation of your international obligations under the United Nations to assist Iran in any way, shape, or form.
You know, as we've been talking about, JINSA for years was very focused on the military option. We thought this was the only way that the Iranian nuclear issue was really going to be addressed, short of collapse of the regime in Tehran. Now that we had this 12-day war, while of course the military option needs to remain on the table, especially if Iran does certain things, that needs to trigger a U.S. and or Israeli response, which we wrote about, which we listed and discussed briefly in the paper in early July. Seems to me now there has to be heightened focus on sanctions because the Iranians, I think, have taken seriously the U.S. and Israeli military threat, which they didn't for a while, for most of the time. So I think there has to be a renewed emphasis on the sanctions. And obviously we'll have to be watching to see. And hopefully the administration, you know, you don't get a sense with this administration, even after this major war, that they stepped back and really thought about, okay, what does this mean for our strategy? What does it mean for the Middle East? What does this mean? How do we handle Iran? What does this mean? How we deal with China and so on? But they do need to focus on this, and it'd be good if they had some really more strategic focus on how to follow up on this war. But JINSA will do its best to try to give some thoughts about how to do that.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. And it's also imperative now because it's obvious that after the 12-day war, Iran is really on its back heels. The internal situation in Iran is unclear. They're absolutely paranoid about having been penetrated so badly, arresting people, over 20,000 people allegedly arrested, many executions. And of course, as we've talked about before, the economy is bad and getting worse. The inability to provide the very basics to their population on a regular basis in terms of clean drinking water and electricity has been absolutely crippling. And now really is the time for us, as you said at the opening, not to take our eye off the ball, even as we deal with all these other crises and conflicts around the world, that this, having made this much progress on the Iranian file, it's not done yet. Now is really the time to keep our foot on the pedal and on across all fronts, comprehensively, militarily, diplomatically, but particularly now on the economic level where they're so vulnerable. Now's the time to really push hard, push our advantage hard, and give the Iranians absolutely no choice but to try and change their strategy.
100%. Well, look, this has been Snapshot on Snapback, which we welcome our audience to say quickly 3 times. I'm not going to do that so I don't embarrass myself. But John, it's great to have you. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this week on Snapshot on Snapback.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, bye. Have a good rest of the week. Bye.